Hello and welcome back to the Product Launch Podcast. As always, I'm the host, Sean Boyce, CEO and founder of Next Step. I would like to welcome my guest to the show today, David Brimley. David has traveled the world, helping people make sense of low latency, in-memory technology solutions. With 30 years in the IT industry, he began his career as a COBOL programmer before moving into investment banking IT as a Java developer and architect. Today, David is the Chief Product Officer at Hazelcast, where he is helping expand the portfolio from its core in-memory data grid offering to address new use cases such as stream processing, cloud-managed services, and digital integration. Hello, David. How are you? And thanks for being on the show.
I'm well, thank you. It's great to be here, Sean.
Excellent. So kind of before we dive into the topic that we want to talk about today, it would be great to hear a little bit more from you in terms of your background and how you became the Chief Product Officer at Hazelcast.
Sure. Okay. Well, I would say it's mostly not a very traditional route into product management, or at least as far as I can tell. But as the biography at the start, told us that my background is in development. So I'm an engineer by trade. I left school and I went straight to work working for what was a book club. I don't know if you remember the book clubs from about 20 years ago, where you used to have to buy a book every quarter. But I actually worked for a company that was selling, had that business model, and it was actually mainframe programming, writing COBOL programs. So that shows my age. And then I progressed from there, and obviously we went through the 90s, and I'd learned other programming languages, and I eventually, through complete accident, I live just outside of London, and the City of London has a very, very big banking industry, and with investment banks and equity trading and all of these different trading systems, and I thought that seemed like a really exciting place to be. And it was, if you was an IT developer in the 90s and the early noughties, that was a great place to go and learn your craft. So I got myself various jobs at the investment banks, and that's generally where I stayed for about 15, almost 20 years is working in those areas. And I did various roles from junior programmer, and eventually I became a senior architect. And it was in those days that I came into contact with this product category, this technical product category called in-memory data grids. And really what they were solving was a problem around just processing as much data as quickly as possible in a low latency manner. And if you think about trading systems, that's really one of the ways that you win in this environment, is to be very, very fast. And so I built up a breadth of experience building these systems for various investment banks. And it was at that point that I was contacted by the founder of one of these in-memory data grids. They were looking to expand their business out in London, and that they realised that the investment banks were one of the key buyers of this technology. And so I met the founder in London, and we had a chat. And I took stock. It was kind of a risk to do this because I was in a kind of a very well-paid job. It was secure, and did I, at the age of, I think, 45 at the time, did I want to go off and ditch all of that and join this startup? So it was kind of a scary thing, but I thought, well, why not? I can always maybe go back, and so that's how I kind of jumped into this world of startups and software vendors, where I'd been a consumer of all of this stuff for so long, and now here I was on the other side of the table, and I was actually helping to build this stuff, trying to help to sell this stuff, and that was back in 2014, and in those days I was employee number one in London. So it was a really interesting role, actually, because I did a bit of everything. I did a bit of sales, I did a bit of marketing, I was doing product management, I was doing a bit of coding. So it really was, in terms of startups, it was we had people around the world, but it was just me. So it was a real career change, and but luckily it's turned out for the best. So really happy with how things have turned out. And Hazelcast as a company, if I just say a few words about the company, it's grown tremendously. We in terms of what we do, we're this in-memory computing platform. So we help deliver data to your applications in an extreme low latency way. Certainly a lot that people tend to use this technology when they, they might be writing their applications and storing their data in traditional databases. There's always a business case for getting that data quicker. And this is where we come along. And that sort of basic proposition has really resonated around certain industry sectors, as I said, particularly the banks. We do business with pretty much every major bank that you can think of around the world, pretty much every major credit card processor. If you're swiping a credit card, chances are somewhere along that transaction route, there's a piece of Hazelcast software involved in that. And when you do some retail banking, especially now in the digital transformation age that we're in, where banks are building out more and more of these channels out to their customers, Hazelcast is in there somewhere. So it's a product that you mostly use every day, but you don't know it. We've been incredibly successful. So I'm pleased I took that leap.
For sure. Yeah, it's certainly some fascinating use cases. And I imagine some unique technical challenges associated with the work that you're doing. I remember when for the first time I learned about how, like, Wall Street in New York, right, the trading hub for North America for the most part, in large parts of the world, that there's fierce competition to get a building depending upon the side of the street that it's on, just because of the physical proximity to the trading platforms and what that can mean in terms of milliseconds and latency. It's just like, it's such a level, it's so many levels deeper than what you might think in terms of, because I have a technical background as well too, in like network engineering, but that's at such an extreme level. However, when you multiply it out over however many transactions and how much volume of data, you start to realize what a significant impact that can make, and where the supply demand kind of economics increases the marketability of the value of making a transition like that. So I can only imagine the fascinating problems that you guys are trying to solve at Hazelcast, and the unique use cases that you hear from time to time.
Yeah, it's definitely most people, think, as we go about our day-to-day business, we think in terms of seconds. And most developers and engineers will know about measuring things in milliseconds. But now we're down to the point in trading systems where you're down to very, very low microseconds, if not nanoseconds, to complete transactions. So it's definitely in the last 10 years that level of measurement, that factor of measurement has decreased. And actually, just going back to your story about the moving the buildings close to these points on where these lines coming from the trading systems, and being as close as you can physically to the trading venues. There's a story, I don't know if you've ever read is it Flash Boys by Michael Lewis? There's a very good book, and he goes on to talk about these traders and the extremes they went to build their systems to win this advantage. And one of the stories was that they actually physically located themselves as close as possible. But there was a story slightly earlier on in the history of all of that, where I think it was they was building a fiber optic link between, I think it was the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or one of those exchanges in Chicago over to New York, and they actually, to save and reduce that latency, they were actually knocking down buildings so that they could have a direct line of sight. Because believe it or not, fiber optics, when it moves around corners, it actually introduces latency. So they were actually tunneling under train stations. They were buying houses. They were knocking down things. Just have a direct, as the crow flies, direct line for this fiber optic cable. So that just goes to tell you that the importance of speed in today's world.
That's fascinating. I had not heard that element to it before, but when you start to think about the properties of the different types of medium, that makes sense. It certainly does. Certainly takes the story to another level. Fantastic. So we have a bunch of questions for you, of course, and in particular, what we want to talk about today, right, is among others, right, building out the product function at your organization. But before we get there, right, this transition from technical to product, which is one that I've made myself as well too. But it's always helpful to have differing perspectives on the topic and understand that transition and making it from other professionals like yourself. So there's a couple things that you referred to in the stories that you've told so far and the information you've given about your background with regard to the importance of like subject matter expertise from the environment in which you came as well too with regard to the industry, right? Going from very high levels of industry and much larger organizations, then down to the startup world. Love to hear more about that. And then also the importance of the technical expertise when it comes to being a successful product professional or a product manager. Love to hear more about that. But perhaps first, kind of the best place to start initially was I'd love to learn more about both your what your beliefs or feelings are with regard to the importance of the industry expertise when it comes to having that and being successful in a product role, and then that transition you made from both technical to product, and any challenges that you kind of experienced along the way, and if you feel that you're in the right position to be successful right now in the product role, if that technical expertise helped you or if it presented unique challenges. Anyway, love to hear more from you about really both of those topics.
I would say that the real reason why I was hired into this role originally was just because I had that subject matter expertise, and the buying persona for our products were people like me. So they hired someone like that person, and I was used to help build out the product and also sell it to these people, because it wasn't a traditional sales channel that you could use and sell this stuff. You had to kind of sell it on a very technical level. And so in the early days, it was very clear there was that the company I joined was up against maybe one or two incumbent, much larger companies who had a bigger share of the market and were arguably more feature complete at that time in terms of their products. And so I came into Hazelcast with this perspective of, okay, I can see this wonderful future for Hazelcast, but we're going to need A, B, and C to at least compete in terms of table stakes, right? These are the table stakes features we need. So those early days for me were kind of easy. It was just a case of knocking off these things that I knew we had to deliver. I didn't really have to do any research. I didn't even really have to talk to many customers, because I just knew, because I was a customer in the past, that we needed these things. And so those earlier years for me were very, very easy. I would say actually things have gotten harder in the last couple of years in terms of my role. And that's because of two things. One, we became feature complete within this in-memory data grid category. So we'd done all we could do pretty much in that category. And I'd exhausted my subject matter expertise in that area. And so I found myself in a position about 2 years ago where we knew we wanted to, move our products to address new use cases that I didn't necessarily have business expertise in, and how do we go about deciding what we did? And this is where I found myself at that point where I had to really at that point learn how to become a product manager, because I didn't. I was going through these first couple of years and I was thinking, well, this product management stuff's a breeze. I don't know why everyone's complaining about everything. We just have to do these things here. And but since then I've discovered this whole this whole amount of stuff that I had to learn about product management, because I'd never been formally trained as a product manager. I was an engineer and an architect, and I was a highly technical person, but I'd never from scratch tried to decide how we invest all of these millions of dollars of R&D budget into building something new potentially. And so this is when I had to start training myself. I read various books about how to be a product manager, and how do you find out what your customers really need? The eternal question. How do you build something people want to pay you money for? And so, yeah, that period, I would say, over the last 2 to 3 years that's where the learning curve for me really kicked in. And there was something unique about our organization as well that was interesting. We're very internally, we're very technically heavy. We have a lot of developers. They're very, very. This is a very brilliant. I love this environment where our engineers are very vocal in how they think the product should, the direction the product should be going in. So you get this very, very loud feedback from the internal engineers as well. And something I had to learn was that it's not enough just to talk to customers and look at the market and try to find, product market fit, try to maybe find a niche with some unique selling points for your product. But so that's only part of the battle. And I learned that through a couple of false starts in this area, I learned that actually you have to evangelize internally very, very heavily your product vision as well. You really have to win the buy-in of everyone in the organization so that we're all together and you're executing as one. That was a hard learned lesson for me, I think, and I'm still learning it. I mean, I look back on my, when I work, and I think, well, actually, maybe we could have changed something here. And so I'm in, you could say I'm in a fairly late stage in my career, but I'm learning a whole new discipline. It's been a really interesting couple of years.
That's a really fascinating perspective, and it certainly makes sense. I think a lot of people think about making a transition into product, or other people try to do so as well too. I'm one of them as well, coming from more of a technical background, and then getting closer to the customer and understanding these problem spaces, and really opening up my eyes and experience to all these other various functional groups of a product organization and the importance that that role fulfills was enlightening to me, and very engaging as well too. But it sounds like you went through these gyrations as well too. It let me know where the gaps were in my abilities and skills, and I had to learn these other disciplines, as you've articulated well also, which is I need to get buy-in from these stakeholders to understand what motivates them, and what do they need as well too. And then that falls typically on the shoulders of the product manager. So that being a important, critical aspect to the work that you're expected to do to really move the needle for the organization, whereas previously our technical worlds were more siloed.
Exactly.
So I think you did a great job of articulating that.
Yeah, I think if you contrast it to where I've come from, where you worked in as an architect or developer, you generally there would be some kind of business owner above you, and they would say, we need X, Y, and Z. So the product, if you think about it from a product perspective, the product decision was already made for you. So they're just telling you what you need to build, and you go off and build it, and nobody really questions it, because you're getting paid for it. I'll build it for you, okay. But now you're in this position of where you have to. No one's telling you what to build. You have to decide yourself, and that's kind of a scary prospect.
Yeah, certainly plenty of additional responsibility there, and especially coming from a technical role where any question that you have, you can pretty much get answered in terms of what your expectations are. As a product professional, oftentimes you have to set the guidelines there for what we're doing and when and why, and then communicate them throughout the organization. And oftentimes, there are some assumptions, but part of that role also is to validate those assumptions as much as possible with data. And it sounds like, based on your expertise, the subject matter expertise you had from in industry had prepared you actually quite well to make more of a seamless transition from technical to product, because you understood the problem space incredibly well at that given point in time. But then, as you also articulated, as you moved forward and as both the product and the market evolved, and you were no longer, constantly in industry, then you said that's when some of the challenges started to present themselves in terms of, okay, I haven't been here before in industry. Now we're like charting into like uncharted waters, if you will, or new territory. So I'd love to hear if you talk a little bit more about that as well too, where it sounds like, number one, the expert level subject matter expertise in industry can actually help you make a transition from technical to product. So I think that's a big takeaway. But number two is, once you start to reach the bounds of your area of subject matter expertise in industry, how do you recapture that? Like, what was your process like for, understanding, okay, now I need to go get this information because it was so critical in the work that we did previously. And then what does your process look like for updating that moving forward?
Yeah, it's a very important point, and you're right. I think technical people can make that move into product management, but you do have to be aware that that subject matter expertise you brought with you that helps make that seamless transition, it will erode over time because things move on, and obviously you're not down in the trenches on a day-to-day basis building these things anymore, which gave you that subject matter expertise. So what happened to me was the easiest way, or the way, there was a number of ways I tried to get back in touch with what's going on the ground. And there are a number of things you can do. I mean, I had a great network of people I worked with over the last 20 years. And so, I would absolutely say when you do make this transition, maintain that network. Don't leave all those people behind. And so they're a great resource. You can talk to them and go out for coffee with them. Ask them what they're up to. What are the big things they're working on at the moment. And so that was one way I kind of used to sniff out what was the new direction we needed to take. And then you do have to continually keep up to date with. Especially from a technical perspective, we're still a highly technical product. There's all kinds of white papers you have to keep reading. YouTube videos, and now one of the, if you can call it a benefit of the world situation we're in, all of these conferences are online now. So I can attend as many of these conferences as I can stand to sit through and watch on a day-to-day basis. So that was another important thing. But the most important thing by far, and this seems entirely obvious to me today, but I didn't realize it at the time, was cultivate and maintain customer relationships. Get to know your customers on a high, as personal a level as you can, so that they open up to you and they'll talk to you as well. I think part of the problem I had was that, in those early days, I said to myself, well, why do I need to talk to customers? I've been the customer for all this time. I know what we need. And I was kind of a bit flippant about maintaining this portfolio of customer contacts. And I'm sure you've got a lot of product managers on this call now that are aghast at what I'm saying and, thinking I'm a bad professional. But at the time, it didn't seem necessary to me. And now I'm realizing that you can't just turn on this tap of customer engagement. It's something you have to curate and nurture and build. And so that's what I've been trying to do over the last couple of years, is building these contacts. And it's a hard thing to keep those customer contacts because people leave companies, people move to new jobs. So, it kind of dawned on me that you do need to spend, at least half of your day every day trying to nurture those contacts and build up that customer liaison. And it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just send an email blast to everyone on your customer database and say, can we have a call? Because chances are you most really won't get anyone return on any of that. So I think that's been the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing you need to maintain to keep your nose to the ground in terms of industry trends.
I honestly really could not have said that better myself. And I say it all the time. It's interesting how you've articulated it so similarly to typically how I have, in that what I typically recommend for aspiring product professionals is you need to spend upwards of half of your time interacting with, building these customer relationships, fostering them, making sure they're healthy. because like you said, there are respective challenges to doing that, and it isn't a switch you can flip. So that's something you need to build momentum to, and then you need to maintain, just like a network, which I think is another great point that you made in terms of staying on top of the subject matter expertise, right? If you had it and you had connections that you worked with previously that are very close to being in that world all day, every day, then what better relationships to continue to remain healthy and be able to understand, not just where we are, but where we're going, which is part of it as well too. So no, I think you've articulated it incredibly well. And David, I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing your expertise with both myself and our audience. It's incredibly helpful for all product managers, but especially those aspiring and those looking to get into product or make a transition from somewhere like technical, like both you and I have had. And I think the other piece that I would mention as well too, that is really important to note about this case is that even though the products that you build and for the world in which you build them are highly, highly technical and very subtle and subtly nuanced into a very critical component that is, very unique to a particular industry, a lot of the same philosophies still apply when it comes to doing product management properly, like staying in close communication with your network of subject matter experts and continuing to build and foster those customer relationships. So I only have 2 questions for you before we let you go. The first one is, and you mentioned a few of them already, but what resources would you share with the audience where they can go to learn more about either yourself, Hazelcast, the subject matter that we talked about today? I know you also mentioned as you started to dive into the world that is product, you were reading a bunch of books. I'd love to hear about some of those as well too, or really any resources that you recommend that the audience go to learn more.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, with Hazelcast, we're primarily an open source product, and we sell we're an open source project, I should say, and we sell an enterprise product. So if you want to learn more about in-memory data grid stream processing engines, you can go along to hazelcast.com, and you can also visit hazelcast.org, which is the home of the open source products. And on that website, you'll be able to download our software, use it for free, and there's a whole bunch of white papers and tutorials and videos you can watch. So please go along and do that. And then if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at dbrimley. That's BRIMLEY, L-E-Y, at dbrimley. So I tweet there, and it's mainly about distributed systems and quite low-level technical stuff. I tend not to tweet so much about product management, but I'm thinking now that this has kind of piqued my interest in just talking about these my experiences. So I think I might just tweet a bit more about product management there as well. And then in terms of books, actually, there's a number of books I've been reading. Do
you want to start over again? Sorry. When do you want to start from? Let me know.
Yeah, let me just get these names.
Sure, take your time. Just let me know when you want to go, and then I'll just shut up and you can talk.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got 3 books here that I can just recommend. So let's start.
Go for it.
Okay, so as I was learning my way around this product management discipline, you always try to read what people say are the classics of that area. So I hope I'm not being too controversial in calling this a classic, but my CEO, he came from a product background, and he suggested I read some of the works of Clayton Christensen. So there was the book I've read maybe about 6 months ago, Competing Against Luck. It's kind of, some of the stories are quite old, but it really talks about the jobs to be done idea, right? Where you try to not talk about the technology, not get too involved in products, just listen to your customers and just ask them what are they trying to do at a high level. And I think this goes back to the one of the questions that I actually just realized I didn't answer was, do you think that technical expertise is important in a product manager? And I would say yes, it can help, but more so the biggest skill you need to do is to be able to learn that job to be done and ask the right questions. And you don't need a technical skill to get someone to articulate you their job to be done. So you don't, you can still be a very, very good product manager just with that skill. So that taught me a lot about how to talk to customers, because in the early days when I suddenly realized I had to talk to customers, I was acting like a developer or an engineer, and I was going way too low and technical, and asking them, do they need this API or do they need this technical feature? And it came as a revelation to me. Well, no, you don't ask those questions. You talk to them in the round at a much broader and higher level about what are the problems they're trying to solve. And so that book really, really helped me with that. And then there's another book, Playing to Win, which is by A.G. Laffey. I hope I've got that right. That kind of builds on that that idea, but it gives you a lot more lower level detail. So in terms of the order of reading these things, definitely the Christensen books first, and then Playing to Win after. And then going back to the question, when I said earlier about, I didn't realize I had to bring along the entire organization with me as well and evangelize these things. There was a very good book I read called How to Lead in Product Management, and that was by Roman Pilcher. And Roman talks in his book about, how you influence people in your organization, how you make decisions, and how you decide to move forward. There's this, he talks about, how you could do consensus-led decisions, and how you come to agreement. I'm sure there's everyone has heard of this term, disagree and commit, I think, or there's some variation of that. And I wasn't very turned on to that. My nature is I really want everyone to truly believe in this vision. So we kind of worked our ways around how you build consensus. But that book was very interesting. So I would recommend that if you're a consensus-led product manager, that book is very interesting.
Some outstanding options, I will say, and huge fan, obviously, as well, too, of the Jobs to Be Done framework. So thank you for mentioning those resources. We'll link to them in the show notes. And I know you had mentioned the opportunity to follow you on Twitter. The last question I was going to ask is, who should reach out to you and how can they get in touch?
So just follow me on Twitter. I'm interested in talking to two groups of people, really. I'm interested in talking to product managers who want to share ideas, especially if you're in the technical realm. I welcome any kind of conversation, so you can follow me and we can direct message over Twitter. And then any technical people who are watching who are using in-memory data grids or want to learn more about those types of things, please, you can also follow me, and we can talk over Twitter.
Thank you for providing that, David. We'll link to all of that in the show notes. And thank you for being here and sharing your incredible experience with both myself and our audience.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Product Launch Podcast powered by Next Step. If you or anyone you know is involved in scaling a B2B SaaS business, please have them reach out to me about becoming a potential guest on our show. They can email me at sean@nextstep.io. That's SEAN@nxtstep.io. This time, we'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our show, Next Step Consulting. Would you like to know what the right next steps are for your B2B SaaS business? Are you trying to grow and scale, but you're stuck? We can help. To find out how Next Step can help your B2B SaaS business achieve its goals, please email me, sean@nextstep.io. That's SEAN@nxtstep.io. Thanks, and keep disrupting.